and then did interview your dad and other witnesses to find out. And Pittsburgh, though it was one of any city in the country that had black market meats, I mean, everything was, you know, the black market, became sort of the poster child for black market meat sales. But he wrote it with such authority that, you know, it was like he was almost like a government. He was a sort of a government official, because he would write about crime, about the state mental hospitals. He went in to a state mental hospital in 1931 or so as a patient. He went in later for a week, and he came back out and wrote it. And that, I contend that's his greatest. It's like Dickens. I mean, he was in there. He's describing these crazy people and these men, and it was just like. And the state of Pennsylvania had about 8 of those places. He did 3 or 4 major pieces on state mental hospitals. And he had the governor of Pennsylvania sort of like, Ray, do you think this is, we're doing okay now? I mean, they were like checking with him to make sure they had made these improvements. That's the kind of power he had as a journalist. And on top of that, I contend, and I think you would probably stick up for your dad, that he was a principled guy.
Very much so.
You know, he didn't get rich doing this.
No,
he made a nice living.
He cared more about honesty. I think I can remember as a small child, an aunt had the most gorgeous pair of painted sandals I ever saw in my life. So and somehow the sandals ended up in the car. And Daddy discovered them the next morning, and we had a little confrontation, and we drove back and returned, and I had to apologize. And you know,
wow.
This sort of thing. No lying ever. You don't get in trouble if you tell the truth. But, you know, just deeply, deeply concerned about honesty and fairness.
And my final line. I saw that picture in 1994 in the morgue, where nice name, where the Post-Gazette kept its Sprigle files, and they had hundreds of photos and stories of it. And I saw that, and that caught my eye, because we were doing 50th anniversary stories of World War II, right? And I read this, and I read his series, and then I read some other things. And if I had seen that when I was 20, I would have become either a plumber or a lawyer, because I would have never I would have never tried to be a journalist. The way he wrote, and with the authority and everything we had. So they don't make them.
How much experience did he have in the South before this journey?
Very little, but in 1937 he went down to Birmingham, Alabama, which was probably the most racist, systematically racist town even then. Bull Connor was just getting started. He went down. FDR had named Senator Hugo Black of Alabama to be the next Supreme Court Justice. And everybody knew that if Black was from Alabama, he had to have been in cahoots or in bed with the KKK. Nobody got elected dog catcher if you weren't at that time. And so all the big shots went down to Alabama, and they all went down looking for dirt on Hugo Black, who was confirmed like in second. Sprigle went down and ended up befriending like the former or one of the current Klingons of the KKK, talking about chickens apparently. And everybody else left, and your dad stayed, and after a day or two, the guy actually took him to a safe, opened it up, and hands him all of the membership stuff from Hugo Black. Well, by then, so Sprigle whisks this guy out of Alabama, takes him to New York, bangs out like a 6-part series. It's the front page story, coast to coast. Hugo Black is a KKK guy and all this other stuff. And your dad made the case that he still was. Black eventually came on and did a national radio address, a very short one, saying, "I joined, but I didn't stay in." And that was it. Black took off for England. FDR sent him on vacation. He was now a confirmed justice. All kinds of newspaper people were chasing Hugo Black all over London, including Scotty Reston of the New York Times, was like ambushed him in a hallway or something. but nothing changed it. But your dad was given the Pulitzer Prize in 1938 for that series on black, and it was considered to be the news story of 1937. And so,
first Pittsburgh reporter to win the Pulitzer Prize.
yeah, that's right. And he didn't. And though your dad was in Birmingham several times back and forth, to do this, he must have seen, what Birmingham was like. But he didn't write anything about it in that series. He didn't say, oh, and by the way, black people in Alabama are really, treated poorly and all this.
There were some other earlier articles before the black thing, some of Justice Black's behavior. He, for example, got involved in a murder trial in which an enraged father murdered a Catholic priest because he had married that man's daughter to a Filipino.
Yeah. It wasn't a really nice country in 1948.
Right, and and then Black had a lot of involvement with the insurance companies in Alabama and so on. So you've got a taste, but right then he was concentrating on Justice Black.
The only major piece that Sprigle did that involved black people in Pittsburgh, and the Post-Gazette ignored the black world, and in 1948 there were about 120 or 30,000 blacks in metropolitan Pittsburgh. About 40,000 of them lived on the Hill. 10,000 whites lived on the Hill, roughly. And nobody wrote anything about the Hill, really, white or black, but certainly they didn't write about the great jazz, the unbelievable jazz culture. You got Billy Eckstine, a homegrown superstar, who became the first black pop superstar. Came here in the Crawford Grill and all those clubs and everything, and Billy Eckstine would come to town and perform. The Post-Gazette wouldn't even note that he was in town. And you had people like Louis Armstrong and all these people. They'd play for white audiences downtown, and they'd walk up on the Hill and play in the clubs at night. But the Hill District, anybody wants to write a book and you have the time, that is a book ready. And I know that my friend here, John Brewer, knows more about the Hill than anybody, and has written a cool book called The Kingpins of the Hill, right? Or Kingpins of Pittsburgh, which is written from the point of view of Gus Greenlee, who was the numbers baron, who owned the Homestead Grays and built a baseball field up there for him and everything. Because
that was the Crawfords. Yeah,
which one did he?
Own the Crawfords.
Did he own Gus Greenlee on both the Grays and the Crawfords?
No, he owned Pittsburgh Crawfords.
The Crawfords, okay. And
Composing Jr. Was the owner of the Grays.
Okay. I hope I didn't say that in my book, but it's in any case, your dad did a story about the numbers coming to Pittsburgh, and Gus Greenlee and Woogie Harris, two black men who were basically bootleggers, brought the numbers game to the city of Pittsburgh, not the mob. They were eventually taken over by the mob and the New Kensington people, and so was everybody else. But they brought, and your dad did a story on the numbers racket 10 years after it had come to town, and he featured Woogie Harris and Gus Greenlee, and he treated them, and I was a little, I was thinking, uh-oh, how do you, and your dad treated them like entrepreneurs and businessmen who made money. He didn't do any moral, grandstanding about these guys who were preying on basically, because by 1936 when this came out, everybody played the numbers every day in Pittsburgh, whether you're rich or poor, basically, in every neighborhood.
Well, white people played them too.
Oh yeah, that's what I mean. It spread. I mean, the Italians had, Jews had their thing. Everybody had, their own little numbers racket. And eventually,
Art Gurney had his.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, the Irish guys over on. But anyway, your dad wrote this piece and treated both Greenlee and Woogie Harris in a really
I worked at
good
summer at the
fair
Coke building, and I played the numbers every day.
Yeah, sure.
That's okay, I worked summers at the courthouse.
Yeah,
And
and you
youngest
played
guy
the
came.
numbers.
I didn't play, I would have been shot and I didn't know. But, no, well,
Yeah.
But anyway, the rest of it's in the book, and if there are any mistakes, tell me, and I hope I'll have to have a new printing and I can repair them. I'm spoiled by it. saving 12 garbage tubs of her dad's material and allowing me to travel from here to there and route through them and then bring 2 of them back. That was in 1998 when I concentrated on this story. And then later, all your dad's stuff is at the John Hines History Center.
Right.
And now, and it's nicely art. You should go visit it, actually. It's just like so nice.
I want to say that without Bill, those things would still be down here. And a lot of people wouldn't know anything about Dad. And just as a loving daughter, it makes me so proud to know that he's being recognized.
I told Peduto, our great mayor, well, not my great mayor, probably half of you guys great mayor, that he should name the, I don't even know what the name of the bridge is. Is the Greenville Bridge that's being fixed? I know, that he should name it after Ray Sprigle, Pittsburgh's greatest journalist. I gave him a book about 4 weeks ago, and I don't know if he's ever going to like send me a tweet or anything and say thanks, but he certainly hasn't read it yet.
Okay, I haven't read it yet either.
Well, thank you all for coming.
Yes, thank you.
Hang around. If you can, talk to Bill, talk to Ray. Eat some more food.
Well, I'm not going to make Ray cry.